You're listening to the Arts Unknown podcast. I'm your host, Jared Rocco. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the show. If you're a returning listener, well then welcome back. On today's episode, I got a chance to chat with Beth Sterling. Beth is a vocalist, educator, and artist with 2 degrees in classical vocal performance. She has nearly a decade of experience performing and teaching in the greater Boston area. She is also the co-founder of the artistic development company, Creative Peaks. I had a great time getting a chance to chat with Beth about her musical journey and the ups and downs of trying to make it as a classical vocalist in the 21st century. Let's take a listen. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So we want to get to know you and a little bit about your career and history as a musician, a creative, and also in your involvement with the company Creative Peaks. But we're going to go way back as far as you can remember. Walk us through how you got started in music. Maybe let's start with what was some of your first musical memories as a child.
That's a good question. This is going to sound really cliched. I was one of those kids that was like always singing. So I don't actually remember starting to do it or deciding to do it. I literally always wanted to be a singer as far as I can remember.
Okay.
I think partially because I just always enjoyed singing and people would tell me that I was good at it from a young age.
That's nice. It's always good to have that positive feedback at an early age.
That maybe wasn't the greatest thing later on in life, but early on it was great. So I had good confidence in myself as a kid in my singing and everything. So that's just something I always wanted to do. My very first public performance, I was 6.
Okay,
and
that's pretty young.
Yeah, it was for my school.
Okay.
They were doing this multicultural fair or some kind of performance. And I didn't have anything very culturally exciting, but my mom wanted to have me apply for it anyway. So they just put me under American, like generic American.
Generic American.
And I sang the national anthem.
Wow. That was your first performance?
Yeah, when I was 6. And I remember shaking really bad. But my parents videotaped it, and my younger brother used to constantly watch it at home.
Oh, God. So make you relive that moment over and over again.
I thought I did well, and that I remember being one of the first times that other people around me outside of my family were giving me positive feedback for something performance based that I was doing. And other than that, I did choir as a kid. I was always involved in
some kind of
chorus,
or choir.
Doing theater camps, things like that, auditioning for plays.
Nice. So it wasn't just strictly singing. You liked doing the theater stuff
I really
as well.
have always loved performing and being on stage. It's harder to do as an adult, but I loved doing it younger.
And did you have positive experiences doing that as well? Doing the theater stuff?
Mostly starting out, I did. It got a little trickier in high school. I mean, I'm sure that's the case for everybody. So in my case, in middle school, we moved from New Jersey to Houston, Texas.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a big change.
Yeah, it's a big change.
Geographically and probably culturally as well.
Yeah, culturally it's very different. And the music environment is very different in the South as well. It's a good thing. It's great that we moved there, actually. It's just very competitive and
interesting.
Very high level, and things are held to a very high
standard. In the way
standard.
that New Jersey wasn't as much?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wouldn't know 100%. Just having lived and taught in the Northeast as well.
Okay.
The competitiveness and the standard for public education music is a little bit different than it is in the South.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, sports are super competitive in the South too, and I would say that things like music, like band, orchestra, choir, kind of lives up to that level of competitiveness. Yeah. So overall, that was a really good experience, though, because that was something to strive for.
Sure. How old were you when you moved to Texas?
11.
11. Okay.
Yeah.
And you grew up and were born in the New Jersey area?
I was born in Connecticut.
Okay.
And we lived in Arizona for like a hot second, but I don't remember it.
Hot second, no pun intended.
Yeah. So mostly I remember growing up in New Jersey.
Okay.
And then moving when I was 11.
When you were 11. Okay.
So when I moved, we got exposed, I joined choir immediately.
And you already had done choir at that point?
Yeah, I'd done just children's choir. I went to Catholic school before, so it was children's Catholic school choir.
Okay, so you got the church end of the music experience too.
When I moved, suddenly you had to audition for everything.
Where you didn't before?
No, it just everybody was allowed to do it. Yeah.
Now, do you think that was part of because you were also older? Like the older kids, you had to start auditioning because it was a little bit more selective?
Partially, yeah. I'm sure that would be the case anywhere.
Yeah.
They also have, and they do this in the Northeast as well, all-state choirs.
Oh, yeah.
Or in the case of Texas, it was all-region choir because Texas is so very
Texas
huge.
is way bigger than New Jersey or Connecticut.
Yeah. But my friends and students' experience of doing all-state, not that it isn't competitive and high level here, because it is. I think it's just geographically, it's a smaller area.
Sure.
Is recording themselves and sending a tape in and then getting into Allstate.
Got it.
And in Texas, it's a whole other thing.
Okay.
So you have a whole series of auditions and people go to summer camps to learn all of the music.
Like training and prep.
Yeah. So there's all this prep involved. And then when you audition, you just get a number called. Nobody on the panel ever sees you, but you're behind a screen so that they don't, become influenced by what you look like.
A little bit less biased.
Yeah, you're not. You have to stay in the school all day long on a weekend. You're not allowed to sing or vocalize except for your warm up time.
Wow.
Or look at your music that whole day. Because it might give you an unfair advantage.
Right.
Yeah.
So they take this really seriously.
Yeah, it's
down
very,
there.
very strict. And I actually never made it into All-State Choir in Texas. I made it all the way to the All-State auditions, and they only take the first chair, and I didn't make it.
Oh, man. Very selective.
Yeah. So I actually think that was a good experience, though.
I was going to say, did that influence your experience? You weren't too bummed out or disappointed by that?
I was definitely bummed out.
Yeah.
Especially because up until that point, I was a big choir nerd in high school. I was like choir president and
That's okay. Admit it.
homecoming choir princess or whatever. I was really into it.
That's a thing? Homecoming choir princess?
It wasn't princess. I think it was like, I don't know. For the
what
homecoming.
Was,
so homecoming's another thing that's really big in the South.
Okay.
Have you ever seen the Mums?
Maybe.
So homecoming's this whole thing. And the guy...
I'm not from the South, by the way, the listeners, anyone listening. I grew up in the Northeast, so this is all new information to me.
Yeah, and I lived in Texas for about 10 years, but I'm not a Texan. It's a very different thing.
Right.
And anybody that has lived there, I think, will know what I'm saying. But there are these things called mums, which are these giant...
Like the flower?
Paper flower thing, and there's like teddy bears and other decorations on them with big long ribbons, and they're hideous and cute. They're like as big as your head, right?
Oh my god!
And if somebody
you wear these,
if somebody asks you to homecoming, they're supposed to buy you a mum, and give it to you, and you're supposed to wear that like all day.
Wow.
And that
as
shows
like
your,
a representative
homecoming
of
spirit. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So then there's the homecoming court as well. So I got voted like homecoming choir queen or whatever.
Got it.
I have a twin brother, and he got voted king.
Oh God!
that year. So they gave this whole speech about they shared a womb and now they're sharing the crown, and like,
oh God,
that was one of our friends who thought he was being very funny.
Yeah. Oh jeez, kind of cringy.
Anyway, that's the level of like into
the
high
choir
school
world
choir
and the
I was.
music
Yeah.
world.
So you get very used to being like the best singer at your school, and then you have to go out in the world and compete against all these other people that are also the best singer at their school. So having that chance to fail at it, even though I worked very hard, I think was a
positive experience.
Yeah, I look back on it positively. I was very upset at the time.
Sure.
But, you know.
It gave you a realistic view of the world.
Yeah, and also understand, you know, you're not
age.
always going to be successful, and you may give it your all artistically, and it's still not to somebody's taste.
Yeah.
And you may not get the thing that you want, and that's fine.
Right.
You know,
Life goes on.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it was great experience, that level of competitiveness, both because it keeps your expectations high for yourself. I guess you're always working towards something better.
Right.
But then you also get those chances to fail safely when you're a kid.
And you probably have a realistic assessment of your talent and your skill level, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great.
So,
now, were you doing any, I assume you were also going through general music classes, or did you not have to do that because
I didn't have to do that. When you're in
choir?
choir, you don't have to take general music.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Now,
I did take music theory, not to interrupt.
Okay,
I did take,
okay.
music theory senior year of high school.
And that probably helped with your singing and stuff, right?
Yeah, I think singers kind of get a reputation for.
I was going to say there's kind of a negative stereotype, like, oh, you're a singer, you're not a musician.
Yeah, you're not a which that gets under every singer's skin.
I'm sure. We won't go there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some that are quote unquote bad musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And, there are lots of just musicians out there in the world that don't know how to read music. It doesn't make them a bad musician. I think it's a great skill to have.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to be somebody that, just relied on like how pretty my voice sounded. I wanted to be a musician, and I was very interested in the theory and everything as well. So.
Nice. That's great. Now, what was your experience like as being a student in that situation? Did you ever take private lessons also, or was it just instruction in the group classes in school?
Yeah, I did. When you're in any upper level band or orchestra or choir, where I went to school, then you're required to take private lessons.
Really?
So I was in the top level choir from sophomore year on. Nobody that's a freshman was even allowed to be in it. In my school, at least. That differs from school to school.
Right.
And I was also in a specialty choir, and they require that you sign up for private lessons. So I took private lessons.
Outside of the school, or?
You can either they have teachers that come into the school, and you can take a lesson once a week during your lunch hour or your lunch break, or during choir class. They'll just pull you out for a second.
Got it.
And actually, my brother teaches through a school for saxophone in Texas, much the same way. Or you can take private lessons. So we ended up taking lessons with my brother's friend's mom, who was a voice teacher who lived on our street.
Nice.
I wanted to take lessons earlier than 14, but she would not allow me to.
Interesting.
So it's
why is that?
Well, up until fairly recently, I think the common idea behind singing is that you have to wait till you're done with puberty, or mostly done with it.
And why is that?
Just because the voice has fully developed by then. It's mostly the size it's going to be as an adult. Right. Although that's may or may not be true by age 14
your vocal cords you're talking about
vocal cords, the larynx, the rest of your physiology. So like your rib cage, even your lungs are the right size. It was just commonly understood that you wouldn't start vocal training until you were a little bit older. And it's still okay to do that. Now things are changing a bit. There's a lot more literature out there for training adolescent voices and training children's voices. Obviously, you do have to approach it differently. You can't teach a child to sing operatically, because that would be like asking a child to play in the NFL. Like they're not vocally ready.
So it just wouldn't be stylistically or physiologically appropriate.
Yeah, you can do damage to the voice. And I think that was kind of why... through all of my schooling in college and grad school, I don't even think I was really taught to teach anyone under the age of 13 or 14. Even though that's mainly what I'm doing now. Because it's just assumed that it's not even going to start till you're older. And I think partly because of that fear that you could damage a young person's voice. Right. But now, since there's so much more research and how to safely work with a child's voice.
I was going to say, is there just more knowledge around that?
I think there's just been more research. More people are taking children as students because there's also the understanding, if a certain parent wants that kid to have lessons, if maybe they're a stage parent or a pushy parent, then if it's not you, then they'll go to somebody else. Right. So it may as well be you, and you can teach them to sing healthily. Right. Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. So how was your experience as a private voice student? It was in high school, right? You started?
Yeah, in high school. I did briefly have lessons at age 8, actually, because my mom just knew I liked to sing and put me in lessons. And the teacher really resented having a kid that young. I don't even know why she took me. So my very first experience with lessons was horrible.
Really?
The teacher didn't like me. She made me feel dumb.
Oh, no.
Not
good. All great things. Because up to that point, you said that was 8?
That was 8.
And you were 6 when you did the national anthem and whatever. Yeah. So up to that point, sounds like you had pretty positive experience.
Yeah.
Everyone's saying, go Beth, go. And then you get to that, I'm interested in that because that could have been a brick wall where you could have said, all right, you know what? I'm not going to do this.
Yeah.
And then you could have quit.
Yeah.
But you didn't.
I mean, lots of tears. And I did eventually stop the private lessons.
Yeah. How long did you study with that teacher for?
I think, that was a long time ago. Maybe a semester. I think my mom made me stick it out till sort of like the end of a semester. And then I was crying every week that we had to go. So she finally was like, okay, it's not that it's hard. It's that this is a really not a good experience.
Yeah.
But then I immediately jumped back into singing in ways that I enjoyed. So
all right, that didn't discourage you at all.
I don't recall it. I mean, I'm sure I had a moment
a while ago.
Yeah, I'm sure I had a moment of being very despairing about it. But I don't recall it making a huge impact.
Do you think that experience, the positive experience when you were younger, or experiences, helped keep you going? Where it's like, okay, this is a minor bump in the road, but we want to keep doing this because it brought you a lot of joy, I imagine.
Yeah, and I think I had parents and adults in my life who were good at really trying to get me to understand that, that a bump in the road wasn't the end of the world, and that I could pick myself back up and keep doing things that I liked. So it didn't affect my self-worth as much as it might have, I guess. At that age, I also really wanted to audition for like Broadway musicals and Annie and stuff because we lived like an hour away from New York. And my mom at the time was going to acting school in New York, and I really wanted to go with her and audition, but she never let me. And that was mostly because she didn't want me to be like a child performer. She was like, you're a kid and you should just be a kid right now and not
have a childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was I was very disappointed at it at the time, but as an adult now, I think that was the right choice.
Nice.
So
you got rid of the other teacher that made you cry after every lesson, and then there was a little bit of a gap, a few years where you didn't take lessons, but you were still
I did. I just did choir, and I, auditioned for like pop show and stuff like that, which are like pops concerts at the end of the year.
Got it.
And other solos and things, and I was doing region choir and all of that. So then I got my private teacher freshman year of high school.
Okay.
And that was
the boyfriend, someone's friend?
Oh, no, my brother's friend.
Sorry. No boyfriend yet.
I guess it's not necessary that you know who exactly it was, but
it was someone you were close with.
Yeah. So she was great. It definitely was, and I see this a lot in my students as well. It's like they really like singing, and then you come to the first lesson and you're like, oh, this is work. Yeah. Like I actually need to work at this.
You remember having that feeling or that thought?
Yeah. I can't say I was super jazzed every week to go.
Yeah.
Much as I loved singing, just because it was work and I had to work at it, and I had to actually sit down and thoughtfully practice, which I hadn't done much of before. I certainly had for things like auditions coming up, but it's another thing to do that when there's no clear, thing coming up that you need to work on. But overall, it was a good experience. I still keep in touch with this teacher.
Really?
She gave me really solid technique.
How long did you take lessons with her?
I took lessons weekly with her for 4 years.
Okay.
And then,
so pretty much all through high school.
Yeah. And then in the summer, I think the first few years that I was in college, I took summer lessons with her.
Got it. Okay.
So I do feel like she knew my voice very well, and like the growth, could see where it was going.
Right. Sounds like a good match.
Yeah.
Overall. That's good. All right. So then you were at the end of high school, and then you decide you want to go to school for music.
I did.
What happened?
Yeah.
Okay. How did that come about? I mean, I guess it's not a surprise hearing your life story up to this point. It's like, okay, she's probably going to go for voice and go to college for music.
It was, I guess I never really had much of a debate about it. I was definitely interested in other things, and I'm interested in just arts in general. So I was also really into just like drawing, art, and
so not just
things
music.
Like that, writing. Those are all things I do as hobbies.
Nice.
And I think maybe I considered that, but like music was such at the forefront of my mind, and I couldn't imagine moving forward in life without me being a musician.
Yeah. Making that a part of your life in some way.
So that's all I applied for was music programs.
Okay.
I actually did not get into any music programs.
Oh, no.
My senior year of high school.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Another roadblock.
Yeah.
I sense a theme here. You hit some walls, but you keep going.
Yeah, I think that's true for most people. that at the time was devastating.
I was gonna say that's a pretty big blow.
Especially because so much of my identity had been being a singer and being a good singer and being a good musician. So not getting into any music schools was very devastating.
How many did you apply to about?
I think 6.
6? Okay.
I
Decent
can't.
amount.
I got into my safety school, but not for music.
Okay, right. Because for people who don't know, a lot of colleges, you have to get into the college, but then you also have to get into the music department. And some people, you can get into the college and not get into the music department, or vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. And there's various reasons for why I was not successful.
I was gonna say, do you know why? Did you ever reflect back on that?
Well, thinking back on it, I don't think I was prepared enough, and not because of my teacher or anything. For whatever reason, I don't think I even properly understood, like, hey, I need to be properly warmed up to sing an audition. I can't just bust in there and sing, you know?
Oh boy. So is that what you did? You just blew open the doors?
I don't know
Here
what
I
was
am.
thinking, because I'm thinking back, my teacher definitely made me do warm-ups.
I was going to say,
what
4
was
years
my
of vocal
problem?
lessons. I'm sure you knew. There's some amount of vocal health.
I think there's such a prevalent idea with singing that, like, you have it or you don't, you know, and
definitely.
that it's so easy to be in that mindset. And I think
you're like, I have it, and that's it. And
I was getting so nervous about the auditions that I was just like, no, I have it, you know?
Yeah.
And then I wasn't properly preparing. So that was one thing.
Okay.
So I wasn't showing myself in my best light.
Right.
And also the business, the academic side of it and the actual business side of it changes so rapidly.
Okay.
I don't know that all of the adults around me even knew what the business was like at the time I was auditioning. 100%.
Yeah. And I imagine that's pretty common too. A
Yeah.
lot of people know about the craft.
Yeah.
And not so much about the business.
Yeah.
We can get into that conversation a little later. That's
I mean,
a whole other
I think
thing.
it's probably 90% I wasn't prepared and 10% not really understanding what I was trying to do.
Right.
Because of that. I did get into a college.
Okay.
One of my top ones, just not into the music program.
Okay.
And they sent me a very nice letter accepting me in and suggested I re-audition for the music program sophomore year.
Okay, so go to the school.
Yeah, they were like, you can get your other prerequisites out of the way,
Gen eds
and then
whatnot.
re-audition. So that's what I ended up doing.
Okay. And where was that?
This was at Baldwin Wallace College, which is now Baldwin Wallace University.
Okay.
It's in Berea, Ohio, close to Cleveland.
Okay.
So anyone that's familiar with Oberlin, it's fairly close to Oberlin, actually.
Okay.
So
now, that's pretty far away from home at the time, Texas.
I only applied to colleges far away from home because I didn't want to be in Texas anymore.
Interesting. Why was that? Too competitive?
Well, I did. Well, I just didn't like Texas, and someone's gonna kill me for that.
I was
probably.
gonna say, any people listening from Texas?
I like it enough. It's just, I feel like it's an area you either really love Texas and you never want to leave it, like one of my closest friends who's still there and just loves Texas and wants to live there forever, or you're just not really too jazzed on Texas. No. It's mostly the weather and stuff. It's really not the people. Like the people are awesome. Food's awesome. It's just really hot all the time, and I wanted to be in a different part of the country, basically. Right. I did apply to UT and got into UT. Okay. I mean, thinking back, I really probably should have gone to an in-state school because it would have been a lot less money. And
would have saved some money.
But again, I had no clue at the time, and my parents didn't have a clue because college is so much more expensive when I went than when they went.
Of course.
I think nobody was properly prepared for the burden that
I think that's a common tale. I'm sure you weren't alone in that.
No. So anyway, I went to Baldwin Wallace. I was undeclared for a year. But I did audition for the choir there and got into their top choir and their specialty choir.
Before you were a music major?
Before I was a music major,
Oh, wow. Okay,
yeah.
So that little confidence booster there.
Yeah, and I took private voice lessons. So they actually...
Really?
Before you're allowed to take private lessons through the school, they make you take the beginner group voice class.
Okay.
So this was like... I had such a chip on my shoulder about this because I was like, I am a singer. I don't need to be taking beginner group voice with all these other people that don't know how to sing and singing Nel Corpo non mi sento. I didn't want to be doing it. Yeah. But good textbook. That teacher became my private teacher.
Okay.
And I mean, I did learn things there about pedagogy that I maybe didn't really think about before. So I took private lessons and then I re-auditioned. And I auditioned for music ed and performance.
Double major?
Well, I really wanted to do performance, but I auditioned for both programs just in case.
Okay.
At the
was it a different kind of audition for both majors? Or was it you do your audition and you say, I'm going to try to do both?
Yeah, it's the same audition and the same sort of interview process. Music ed was a very, very intense program. Like you take the most credits out of anybody in the entire college per semester.
Wow.
And a lot of students take it, or it's a 5-year major for a lot of people.
Really? Okay. Just because there's so many classes.
Yeah, and it's mainly teaching you to teach in public schools in group settings,
right.
which isn't really what I wanted to do. But I figured at least I'd be doing music if I got into music ed.
Not into the performance, though.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to be a great musician to get into music ed. I'm not trying to knock that program. But obviously, if you're majoring in performance, it needs to, like, your performance skill
top of your game
has to be very good too. So I got into both programs. I got a letter saying I got into both programs, and then a month later, the school emailed me and said, "Oh, that was a mistake. It's only music ed."
What? A month later?
Yeah.
Oh
this was
God.
after I already changed my major and selected my classes for the next year. So that was another like big devastating thing.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And I ended up talking to my teacher about it, and she was like, they can't just send you an acceptance and then take it back. So she did some investigating, and I was actually like, apparently I was the first on the wait list or whatever.
Oh, okay. For what? A performance major?
For performance major for my voice type. And then they'd sent it to be my mistake or something. So because they sent it to be by mistake, and I was the first on the wait list anyway, they just decided to let me be a performance major.
Wow, okay.
But
that's nice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a whole thing my very first year. So I was a sophomore taking all the classes with the freshmen. Voice majors.
Freshman music majors.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And voice majors specifically because it's very insular because there's not a lot of them, you know. Feeling like I had to prove myself because actually I didn't really get into this program. They just let me be here. So that was a whole thing.
So there's a little bit of a stigma about like, oh, they just let her in because they messed up.
Exactly. So that was a huge... I had a complex about it for a very long time.
No, I can imagine. Because you wanted to prove yourself, and then to have this happen, it's like, okay, like you're probably happy you got in, but at the same time, it's like, that's not the way you would have wanted it to happen.
Exactly. And I felt like everybody could tell that I wasn't as good as them or something, which looking back, no.
Yeah, maybe that was all in your head at the time,
I was perfectly fine, and I did a fine job throughout school. And, you know, I got all the rest of those classes in, so I graduated, you know, on time. And the rest of it was a great experience. A lot of it was just, except for that one mistake with them sending me the wrong acceptance letter. You know, the rest
overall,
of it was all fine.
Experience.
Yeah, you know, once I got over that, most of it was in my head. Most of the issues that I had. So.
And overall, how were your teachers at the school? Not that you don't have to name any names or anything, but experience as far as, you know, you had 2 experiences with 2 different private voice teachers, and now obviously you had, I assume, a different private voice teacher, but you also had, you know, classes that were taught by people. Yeah,
so I had the same voice teacher that helped me get into the program for the rest of my college career.
And this was 4 years? You finished in 4 years, or?
Yeah, I finished completely because I got all my prereqs out of the way.
Right. Okay. I wasn't sure because you were undeclared. I was like, oh, would it have taken you longer, or?
I somehow shoved it all in because I didn't minor in anything. You don't have to minor in anything when you're a music major at my school. So music ed has the most credits, and then other music majors have the second most credits. You take a lot of classes.
Yeah.
That's a hard question about teacher. I mean, overall, I think my teachers were good. I had a teacher for my art song classes who was fantastic and really changed my view on how to approach learning repertoire.
Okay.
My opera workshop classes I struggled with those because they were very like artsy fartsy. Do you know what I mean by that? Like
a little bit.
I'm thinking back.
For listeners that might not understand?
I'm like, those teachers were good, but I would get really mad at them because we'd have to do things like stand outside and imagine you're a building.
Oh God! Okay,
and then imagine you're a molecule of joy and a molecule of just
and what would that
artsy
help?
fartsy theater stuff. It was
the
supposed
point
to
of
help you with acting.
Okay. Visualization.
Yeah,
maybe?
and I think that kind of thing works for a lot of people because a lot of students just absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I did not. I think I'm a little bit too practical to imagine myself as a molecule of joy.
So good.
Yeah.
And I'm foreign to any sort of acting class, so yeah, I would have a hard time with that as well.
I love acting actually, but that kind of style of it was a little much for me.
Yeah. Yeah, the reason I ask about all the teachers and stuff is, we'll talk about your involvement with Creative Peaks in a little bit and how that relates to teachers and stuff. So I'm just kind of curious to get your experience first.
Yeah. I think like any college, I went to a private college, so my experience may not be everyone's. So all of my classes, they didn't have more than 25 people in them.
Wow, okay.
And then
nice.
Music classes were smaller, and then voice-specific classes were smaller.
Oh, even the general ed courses were 25 or smaller. So you never had that huge college lecture experience.
There were about 3,000 people in my entire college, which is now a university, so there's more now. But
at the time.
Yeah, I didn't have that big lecture hall anonymous experience.
Right,
like, nobody ever just skipped class because the teacher would know and you were embarrassed about it.
Right.
So
now, what attracted you to this school? I know you applied to a bunch of schools, but I know you said obviously you wanted to branch out from Texas and stuff.
Yeah, I liked the location, and I felt that the people I had met from that school resonated with me the best, and they took the time to understand who I was and what I was looking to do.
Nice.
And also they gave me the biggest scholarship.
That always helps, man, especially in today's day and age.
That was a big part of it. It was about 2 hours away from where my dad lived at the time, so I wouldn't have been just across the country with nobody.
Right. That's nice.
Yeah.
It's always helpful.
So I think like any college experience, I had some really, really awesome professors, and I had some that were kind of just egotistical, call it in type people.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was a pretty good experience. I think teaching at a collegiate level is very different from teaching high school down.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's why I asked. Like any noticeable difference.
Yeah.
In experience, but cool. And then after that, you said you went to grad school.
I did.
Right?
Yeah.
Was that right after? Did you take some time off?
It was right after.
Okay.
I should have taken some time off, but I thought that I would lose momentum and that I needed to go right on.
Yeah.
Why
do you think you should have taken some time off? Just to have a breather?
Well, just to have a breather. I think if I had taken some time off and done another round of auditions, I would have been more successful. Mm-hmm. Not that I was unsuccessful, but I might have gotten better opportunities. Because ideally for grad school, you want to pay for it as little of it as you can.
Right.
And I ended up paying a good chunk of grad school. So I think I would have just been in a slightly better place if I waited a little bit.
Right.
But it worked out fine. So I went to Longy School of Music for grad school, which was just Longy School of Music when I started there. Then it became Longy School of Music of Bard College.
Ah, okay. Now Bard College is in New York.
Yeah.
But
so
Longy's not in New York.
No, Longy's affiliated with Bard College. So I actually have a degree from Bard, even though I've never gone there. And I think they're still connected with Bard College, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I have to look that up.
So
and Longy's in Boston, for any listeners who aren't familiar.
Yes, it's in Harvard Square. It's a very small school. There were about 200 students there total when I went there. Wow. And it's only a music school. So you got used to the really small, close-knit communities. Yes.
Nice.
So it's only a music school and primarily grad students. There were a few undergrads.
Okay.
But primarily graduate students.
Nice. And how was that experience overall? Was that 2 years, I imagine?
2 years, yeah.
Okay.
I really enjoyed grad school. I liked being focused on the one thing that I wanted to be focused on.
Right.
And
that was a performance major, I imagine?
Performance major,
okay.
yeah.
Vocal performance.
So I was vocal performance. They also have an opera degree, but I was not an opera major.
Okay.
I think... So I really liked being a student overall, and I like going to classes and learning things. So there's a part of me that I think missed maybe a more traditional grad school experience where the academics would have been pushed a little bit harder.
Okay.
I don't think that they pushed it as much as some other schools might have at Longy.
Okay. Interesting.
I got some really nice performance opportunities out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually met Tony in grad school because
This is Tony Rosado, other co-founder of Creative Peaks.
The other episode, yeah.
Episode number 1.
We got put together for chamber ensemble, and I'd never sung with classical guitar before, and we did these songs by Duarte and just Duarte, called 5 Quiet Songs.
Okay.
And then we ended up continuing to do chamber ensemble with each other the next year and a half.
Nice. So it clicked. Good match.
Yeah. So I got really good opportunities through that. My grad school teacher is fabulous.
I was going to ask, how was the experience with the teachers there?
Yeah. I really admire my teacher from grad school, and I still go to her for advice and for the occasional lesson.
There you go.
Her pedagogy was really, really strong, and I think she most influenced my teaching style. Mm-hmm. And I picked her. I had trial lessons with a few teachers, and my
That's nice. You were able to kind of get a sampling of the instructors, the professors.
And most people will tell you that's the most important thing when you're going to grad school.
Especially at grad school levels.
Yeah. And my sort of vibe of who I am most of the time, I think, is a little bit mellow. Mm-hmm. I'm not like that with my students, but just me as a person, I'm more introverted. It's hard for me to get high energy going. My teacher is very, very high energy.
Really? Is that what you wanted?
I thought that would be good. I thought that would force me to get to the point I needed.
To balance you out a little bit.
Yeah. So up until that point, I had been singing mezzo. And I finished out grad school as a mezzo, but she thought I was actually a soprano.
Interesting. Now, how do you determine that for any people who aren't familiar with voice types and stuff like that? There's
many different ways, and there's people that may think none of it actually matters. Just sing something that's comfortable to you, which is also a valid point of view.
Sure.
But if you're going to sing classically or opera, you have to market yourself as a specific voice type.
Got it. Okay.
So for men or lower voices, because they may not necessarily be men, like bass, baritone, and tenor, there's a really big difference between like bass, baritone, and tenor.
Right.
It's a very different sound.
Timbre overall.
For higher voices, like, mezzo and soprano and contralto is a whole different thing. Very few people are contraltos, but mezzo and soprano, not too different. They may have very, very similar ranges.
Okay.
It matters the tessitura that they're most comfortable singing in. So,
tessitura definition, please.
Tessitura is kind of like the range that your voice is sitting in.
Got it. Okay.
I guess. So the soprano tessitura would be much higher than a mezzo.
Okay.
So I had a lot of technique issues that meant I wasn't able to access my higher register.
Even at the grad school level?
Yeah, going into grad, which isn't uncommon because your voice doesn't fully mature until you're about 30.
Wow. Okay.
So most students are not at their full potential for voice yet.
But the way you said it almost made it sound like you were doing something's wrong technique-wise.
Oh, I was. I mean, it doesn't... Not on purpose,
sure.
But everyone has technique issues.
Okay.
I still have technique issues. It's just something that you're always going to be working towards
So that's
fixing.
not something... The reason I asked is like, I figured if not when you were in high school, at least when you were studying in college for 4 years with a teacher, they would have found that and tried to correct that.
I think they did identify it, but a lot of deciding what voice type you're going to sing is also what can you actually sing right now.
Right. That's true.
For me, that was mezzo rep because I couldn't access my higher range. So if I couldn't access it to begin with, then my teachers may or may not have even heard it to know that was a better range for me,
So the teacher at Longy was like, hey, you can hit these notes.
Yeah, and she didn't know immediately either. It was with studying with her for a while. And then I fixed a lot of issues and I was suddenly able to sing a little higher. And then it was like, oh my gosh, actually you're more comfortable up here.
Interesting. Okay. Whole untapped potential that you found.
And this really isn't uncommon for singers. Like your voice changes so much throughout your life, and then just growing up and aging, like my voice is going to continue to change. So I don't know that I'll be a soprano forever.
Right.
Like
Overall, do most people's? I assume most people lose.
Yeah, you lose
their range
as you
get older. Usually, you get deeper and lower.
Yeah.
Is that true for males and females?
Yes.
Yeah. Overall.
Generally, yeah.
Okay.
So it's a constantly changing thing, and you kind of just have to go with the flow and like sing what feels best at the moment. But you also have to market yourself as something.
Right, that's true.
And part of the change in that, going from mezzo to soprano, back when I was doing more opera and things like that, is a lot of mezzo roles are for, well, not necessarily for, but the casting that was being done at the time was for people that were older and like physically bigger and taller than I was. And nobody can see me on this podcast. I'm not short at all, but I'm like a smaller person, and it didn't visually go with
what they were looking for,
what voice type I was singing. Yeah.
Got it. Oh,
Which is kind of a shame. And there's a big movement right now to not worry about that so much, which I'm all for.
Yeah.
But, you know, it was also helpful to start marketing myself as a soprano because people saw that. They saw what I looked like. It meshed with what I was saying my voice was.
Isn't that funny? That's still something that people
it's
with. At the end of the day, you feel like if it sounds good, it sounds good. Doesn't matter what you look like, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd think so.
Yeah.
So I started marketing myself as a soprano after grad school, and that was a whole other like identity shift because I'd been singing alto and choir up until then, and I'd been a mezzo and but now I've been a soprano for a number of years, and I sing. You
felt comfortable in that new role now?
I do. So if my voice changes again, I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
But I'm not singing opera so much anymore.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter so much when you're not auditioning in that realm.
They're imagining you in a certain role.
Yeah. So you can just sing what you sing.
Got it.
You know.
Nice.
Which is a nice place to be in.
Mm-hmm. And then that was done in 2 years. What year did you graduate?
I graduated from Laundry in 2013.
2013. Okay.
And
then this kind of moves us into the next part of the conversation.
Yeah. I have a lot to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, so a lot of this, the point of the podcast, The Art's Unknown, is, you know, kind of uncovering the hidden side of how people make their living or don't make their living as a musician. You know, mainly people have gone to school for music, but not necessarily. In your case, you did twice.
Yes.
You know, when you were going through all this school, did you have a sort of game plan? Like, okay, when I get out, this is what I'd like to do. I'm a musician. How am I going to make money? How am I going to support myself, pay the bills?
No.
Okay.
And I don't think that was something impressed upon me almost at all in college.
Okay, that was my next question. I was going to say, did any of your teachers or professors say, hey, this is great, you're a great singer, but you need to do this stuff, otherwise you're going to end up working at McDonald's or something?
You know, my private teachers, I think you have a closer relationship with them, and I think they were great advocates for me and tried to get me work and everything, and I actually did get one of my jobs through my private teacher.
That's great. Good connections.
But I think it's also a case of things being different now than it was when a lot of these teachers got their jobs.
Right.
Or just sort of an acceptance of, well, being a musician's an unstable career, and we kind of forget to prepare people for that.
Yeah.
So I was very prepared to go out and audition.
Right.
And to fail a lot.
Yep. Because you had that experience before.
Yeah, and you have that experience countless times throughout school as well. So the sort of accepted track for singers and for classical singers and opera singers in particular is that you're going to get done with school and then you're going to go audition for young artist programs.
Okay. And what's a young artist program?
Young artist programs are programs for young artists for younger singers.
Shocking.
Which young singers is considered really anyone under the age of 30.
Okay.
And for male type voices, 35 and under.
Okay.
So baritones, basses, tenors, which are largely men, have a much easier time, I think, in the singing world, just because there are fewer of them.
Interesting.
So,
okay.
and obviously, you get a lot of your work based on your voice type, not just based on somebody needs a singer. They need a tenor. They need a baritone.
Specific, and like with opera for a specific part, right?
Yeah. So for sopranos, number one, there's 8 billion sopranos. So you can be very, very good, top of the line good, which I may or may not be, and still never really get anywhere because you're competing with so many people.
Now, when you say there's a lot fewer men, that's in the classical operatic world?
Yes, and I think also just in singing in general, there's fewer men
really?
doing it. I'm not sure
Okay.
why.
Yeah.
I see that reflected in my studio as well.
Okay.
I have
mostly have
95% girls.
Interesting. Okay. So I feel like at a young
yeah.
age that would make sense, but it does surprise me a little bit once you get older. And
I'm not sure why that is. It might have to do with being young and they don't want to invest in doing it as an adult when they weren't into it as a kid. I don't know.
Right.
That's something to investigate one day.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so the Young Artist programs, anyway,
Right.
they're these programs that you go to after school that give you professional development and training that are going to help you get jobs maybe in an opera house or just some kind of steady gigs future.
Okay,
in
I
the
was
future.
saying, what would that be like? I was going to say steady gig at an opera house. That's...
Yeah, an opera house or just different places around the world or around the country. Just getting gigs is like the main thing that you want to do. And again, I'm not professionally doing this, so I don't know firsthand what it's like, but that was sort of my idea of it.
Okay.
So young artist programs may be free.
Okay.
They may pay you. That's rare. Or you may have to pay to go to them.
Wow.
And most of them happen over the summer. Some, the really, really good ones that are very difficult to get into are like a year-long thing. But the ones that I did were all summer programs. And they ranged anywhere from $500 to like $4,000.
Wow. And you're just out of college for the second time, so I'm sure you're loaded, right?
Yeah, I know, right? So I did a few. And at the time I was like, I have to do this. So I raised the money, or I used the money that I had, which really right out of grad school, I was working at Panera Bread and I really didn't have money to spare.
Yeah. But you felt that was the way you were going to go to make a career and support yourself.
And they were great experiences. I really don't have lots of negative things to say about my young artist experiences, except that I had to pay for them. Right. And you have to pay to audition too. So a lot of classical singer auditions, you have to pay to like go to New York, pay an accompanist, and then pay the company that you're auditioning for. And then you might not get in.
Right. After all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just got very tired of it. But that's kind of what you're expecting to do out of school. But outside of that, how are you going to make money and stuff?
Right.
Nobody tells you. They're just kind of like, get a part-time job.
Right. AKA Panera Bread.
Yeah, but that can be soul-sucking. Working at Panera Bread, not that I don't have any problem with Panera Bread. I still
not to
eat
call
there.
them out specifically.
Yeah, but, I had a master's degree, and I was working as a manager at Panera Bread for like $14 an hour at the top of the level. I started out at like $7 an hour.
Wow.
Day in, day out, that was my full-time job.
Right.
It's
but it wasn't
not
fulfilling, I imagine.
No.
Yeah. After going through all that work over so many years.
Nothing wrong with that as a job at all. And I had great coworkers, but obviously not what I wanted to be doing.
Yeah, of course.
And that was in addition to teaching part-time.
Okay.
Because I did not make enough money teaching part-time to support
yourself.
myself.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't really have made it full-time at Panera Bread either. But it wasn't so much about supplementing my income doing teaching as it was I needed to get my foot in the door somehow. Right.
So was that you were going through a company, or were you doing it like out of your house? And a lot of people do that, or go visit.
So out of school, I had been working at Panera Bread through grad school as well. They were nice enough to, again, not trying to knock this company. I had great bosses. They were like super flexible with me every time I had a show or like
an audition,
teaching. It's very rare that that kind of job will just be like, okay, you can always leave at 1:00 on Wednesdays to go teach. And they accommodated that for me.
That's nice.
Very grateful. But I'm also really happy I don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. anymore to go work.
What time do you have to be in?
5.
Why,
so I'd get up at 3 or 3:30 to get ready. No,
start really early.
The bakers were there overnight. I did have to do overnight for my manager training, but no.
Was this in Boston? This Panera Bread?
This was, it was in Boston.
Okay, nice.
And part of it was I had to take the T there. The T wasn't even running. How did I get there? I must have walked.
The T is the subway for any people who are outside the Boston area.
Anyway, I don't even remember how I got to work, but we opened at 6, so you had to get there at 5 to prep everything.
God.
Yeah.
So, are you a morning person?
No. I mean, I get up at like 8:30 now, and I enjoy the mornings.
Right.
But not getting up.
3 a.m. is, man, that's rough, no matter what way you slice it.
So out of school, I actually had I got a once a week teaching job through a colleague from school who was moving away and could no longer do the job.
Okay.
So she recommended me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Working
that
those
job,
connections again.
I had great students there, but it really wasn't a great teaching environment.
Yeah.
It was kind of one of those almost getting taken advantage of teaching environments.
Yeah. It's a shame.
Yeah. Like, and this is true of a lot of like working through schools. Like they'll treat you as a contractor, but then they tell you when you can work. And
interesting. So you don't have a lot of control over what you do.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of control. And I got a church job through that same person, which I still work at. And then
singing in the church?
Yeah, so I'm the soloist and soprano section leader.
Nice. Okay, so you got a little bit of a performance outlet there.
Yeah, so I'm not a church person, but for most singers, we end up getting church gigs because they're
there's
plentiful,
a lot of music in
and
church.
It's good money. Yeah, so that's like my loan payment every month is what I get for my church job.
Got it.
I had a few private students that I went to their house. And then later on, I got a job at Tufts University.
Okay.
So they have a community music program, and they teach semi-private voice, which is 2 kids per lesson.
Oh, okay. It's pretty unique. It's pretty unusual.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Their teacher was leaving, and my voice teacher also taught at Tufts. And kind of suggested me for the job, and I interviewed, and then I got it. So
nice.
I'm still there. It's a fantastic job.
Nice.
But that's once a week.
Okay.
And then my other teaching job was once a week, and then my church job is once a week.
Right.
So
you got little things here or there, but not enough to really get the ball rolling.
So, and then I, beyond that, like starting teaching, I was teaching kids much younger than I had been preparing myself to teach. So I didn't feel adequately prepared for that. They do tell you that you're going to end up having to teach when you're in school for performance.
I was going to say, did anyone say or warn you?
Yeah, I mean, you had, it was a requirement in both of my degrees to take vocal pedagogy.
Okay.
Which is learning how to teach voice and the anatomy and physiology of the voice. So I'm very grateful that I got all of that experience.
And that was definitely one aspect where they, as far as career and making money, supporting yourself post-college, the professors were knowledgeable
I will say
about
they
that.
did say you're going to have to teach.
Yeah.
At the time I was taking these classes, I was very interested in the classes, but I was like, I don't want to teach. I don't want to teach. So, and I mean, spoiler, that's how I make all of my money now, and I really love it. So,
nice. So you
college
grew into
me
it.
Didn't know what she was talking about.
Yeah. Oh, good. Like you said, you change, you grow.
Yeah, I think perhaps I wasn't given the right impression of what it was going to be like.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because you hadn't taught anyone voice up to that point.
No, I taught, I had a few students in school as part of the pedagogy program.
Okay. This was in grad school or
grad school and college. You have to teach 1 or 2 students as part of your grade and everything.
Got it.
And I think I just wasn't very confident in what I was doing.
Got it. Well, sure. If it's the first time,
yeah.
It's
and then so I'd had a little bit of experience going into teaching as a job, but again, my only experience had been teaching adults.
Okay.
And that's very different when you're teaching like an 8-year-old.
Right. And I would imagine most of the students you teach now are younger.
Most are between the ages of 8 and 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have any adult students?
I have 3 adult students, and they're all musicians.
Okay.
So they're like learning voice is just an
add-on
to what they're already doing. So, yeah.
Got it.
So yeah, I mean, I think as it is for anybody with an arts degree, like going into the real world is a shocker. I mean, I don't regret getting my degrees, and I think I learned a ton, and I don't want to just diss on my teachers or anything because they were great. But I didn't
just think they didn't know because the world they grew up in.
Well, yeah, and I think it's just
and...
the academic program says we have to teach this, and that's what's going to be taught. You know, so like my academic program didn't include arts administration, which is also something I do, or what other jobs can you get with this degree beyond just auditioning and trying to be a singer or a performer, because hardly anybody makes their living doing that.
Right. I was going to say the percentage of people that are successful performing is very low.
Yeah. And it was almost treated like, well, we're not really going to touch this because we don't want you to think you're not going to be successful.
Right.
But I mean, we have to redefine what success is, so again, so few people make it as performers. There are people that perform at top level, like houses that still drive for Uber, you know?
Wow. Yeah. And even still, the life of a performing musician is not easy.
No.
Even though it can be fun and rewarding, it's
not easy. And that's fine. And,
especially if you're touring and driving and traveling.
Yeah. None of us go into it thinking it's going to be easy.
Yeah.
And again, there's nothing wrong with like prioritizing performance and driving for Uber or doing something else because you're doing what you have to do to survive and do what you want to keep doing. But that, you know, it turned out that wasn't really for me at this stage in my life. And I wasn't given a whole lot of direction for like what I could realistically do with my skill set.
Got it. Nice. And hopefully that's something that will change over time. That's what we're kind of trying to change with the podcast a little bit. Uncover the stuff. And in relation to that, I wanted to ask you, now that you've been through that, obviously, you know, your career is still going, it's still changing, developing, you're learning every day, but you've definitely had a wealth of experience over the course since you were 6 or whatnot, whenever you started. What advice would you give to young artists and musicians today who want to try to make a living in the music field? Although I want to kind of broaden that out to maybe just the creative arts in general, whether it's dance or theater or visual artists, you know, or anyone like that. You know, what kind of things would you tell them? Maybe if they're thinking about going to school, you know, or if they're already in school and they're about to get out. I mean, there's a lot of different scenarios.
I guess there's a lot of advice I would give. I mean, I want to be clear. I'm not trying to discourage anybody from pursuing arts as a career or as a major. You should definitely go for it if that's what you want to do. I don't want to be one of those like Debbie Downers.
I was gonna say, because I'm sure there's some people.
Business degree.
I'm sure there's some people I would ask that would say, I went through it. It's horrible. It stunk. Don't do it.
Yeah, that wasn't my experience. I think that a lot of work needs to be done to prepare people for the quote unquote real world.
Okay, so you got to be ready to work.
I did feel let down by that aspect of my education, but I wouldn't say don't do an arts degree. Do it if you want.
Right.
Try and go for a place that's going to give you the most money as possible. Try to not spend an exorbitant amount.
Yeah, I feel like that's something not a lot of people talk about as much as I think it's just kind of a topic that's not fun to talk about.
Yeah,
but it's important.
It's so easy because you want to go to the top thing, right? So like one of my schools was NYU. I wanted to get into NYU, and I got past their first round of auditions, and then absolutely
This was
bombed.
for undergrad?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely bombed the second audition.
Oof.
But even if I'd gotten in, that would have been a crazy amount of money.
Yeah.
And in my head, though, I didn't want to settle for something else.
Interesting. And that's I think that's the thing that's very common.
Yeah.
Because I know, going to music school for myself, I had the same sort of ideas.
Looking back, I wouldn't have been settling though. Like, I mean, you can get a great education many different places. So just do a lot of research on that. You don't need to absolutely break the bank.
Right.
And with most arts careers, I just lisped. Most arts careers, you kind of have to make yourself into something. You need to find your audience. You need to figure out what you're good at, and market yourself.
I was going to say, market yourself and sort of establish a brand around yourself.
And with sort of the onset of technology and the internet and everything, you don't need a degree from like Cal Arts or Juilliard or something necessarily. I mean, that's a whole other route. And yes, that especially going to Juilliard can make you very successful, but hardly anyone gets into Juilliard, right? And nobody, except for this podcast and when I've applied for jobs, has asked where I went to school.
Really?
I mean, nobody asks where I got my degree, really, except as a conversation topic.
Sure. Small talk kind of stuff.
Yeah. So there's many different ways that you're going to demonstrate your knowledge and your skill. It doesn't matter necessarily like how shiny of a name where you went to school
Right.
was.
At the end of the day, can you do the thing? Can you sing?
Yeah.
Or can you not? They don't really care what school you went to.
The other thing I would say is keep working on your non-arts skills, your quote-unquote non-arts skills.
Real world skills?
Yeah, real world skill, you know.
Whatever you want to call it.
And find ways to make your skill benefit you in various other kinds of jobs, right? So I really do feel strongly that arts degrees and music degrees in particular, I mean, that's my experience, really does prepare you for a lot of real world work scenarios. So, I mean, if you're auditioning constantly and getting rejected constantly and getting criticized constantly, I mean, it gives you a really thick skin. So you're going to be the type of person in a work environment that really takes direction and takes criticism well, can be a team player,
Right.
can keep striving to do better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even at my job at Panera Bread, I didn't start out as a manager. I worked my way up through that, and I learned how to ask for what I wanted, because you have to be very direct, I think, in the arts to get somewhere. Yeah. So don't be afraid.
Probably translates to a lot of other jobs too.
Don't be afraid to ask for things. Demonstrate a skill, ask for raises, ask for changes in your job if you need it, ask for changes in your job description. Almost every raise I've ever gotten is because I asked for it.
Interesting. And you feel like music helped you with that?
Yeah, just because at least for auditioning and singing, at some point you have to be like, because it gets very intimidating to look at things and then think, oh, I'm not good enough for that. And then at some point you have to just be like, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go and decide that I actually am good enough for this, and they can agree or not. Yeah. And that's kind of how you have to approach work as well.
And at the worst, you learn something from it. You had the experience, Yeah. So that's great. That's great. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was your company, Creative Peaks here, which obviously ties in nicely. Well, maybe not obviously, because we haven't talked about it yet, but it does. Trust me, listeners, it ties in nicely with all the experience you've had. So tell me about this company. How did it start, and what's it all about?
Sure. So Creative Peaks is mostly the brainchild of Tony Rosato. He pulled me into it about a year and a half ago. He asked if I'd want to be involved in it.
Right.
And after he told me what it was about, yes, I was very enthusiastic about it.
Nice.
So our main mission is to help and empower arts educators.
Okay.
So we've found, as I was talking about before with my experience with school, a lot of people, and again, our experience is mainly with musicians. But
I would say, when you say arts, you mean all aspects of art.
All kinds of arts, dramatic arts, visual arts, any kind of arts educator, particularly people that do one-on-one lessons or classes outside of public education. So we're not talking about public educators necessarily in public school. We found that a lot of people get into it kind of by accident or because they don't have another option. And then they get stuck and they don't know what to do. They don't see how this is using the skill set they have. They don't see how it can make a difference in the world. And we're here to say it does make a huge difference, and you can use the skills you have to make a career. So, and that's something I didn't understand starting out either. I mean, my career is teaching now, which is not at all what I thought it was going to be.
Right. You said in the beginning, you really didn't think of yourself as a teacher, nor would you want to.
No, I didn't. And I mean, now I love it. Don't get me, I mean, I absolutely love it. That's not something I would have envisioned for myself. I didn't know that was possible. And I'm making my living using my degree, being a musician. I'm a musician every day, which is awesome. Yeah. And it's also given me many other opportunities. So we're here to present that option to people, and then to also help them with their actual process of educating.
Okay, and how are you doing that exactly?
So we'll be offering sometime in the fall. We'll be offering online courses, which teach sort of a teaching methodology.
Okay, and this is some kind of methodology that would transcend just music. It would be
it's just a set of sort of standard things to follow when you're teaching mainly a one-on-one lesson. Okay. So like how to approach different age groups, how to best get a concept across in a lesson, how to build a studio, topics about other aspects of professional development.
And you feel you and Tony have had a decent amount of experience in those areas where you feel like you can speak to those.
We're both people that topics? Sort of got into it by accident and have had I've had about 10 years of experience now teaching. Tony's done more. Okay. And kind of built ourselves up to that from almost nothing. Right. So we did a lot of trial and error and a lot of failing on our own to bring you the knowledge. So hopefully you don't have to fail the same way.
Right. Save everyone else a step or two.
But I came from a place of really being unsure about what I was doing and not knowing how to approach different things to, having, I don't have any more space for students. I'm I'm full.
You're totally full.
Yeah.
That's great. It's a great place to be.
Yeah, it's a great problem to have. And it doesn't mean I'm just some fabulous teacher. I learned a lot about how to approach my clientele and how to better myself as a teacher and learn my own subject better in order to better serve them, which
That's
is
great.
why I was able to get to the place that I am. So I am. Which is, we want to bring that to you through Creative Peaks. So it's largely professional development with teaching strategies.
Nice. Very exciting. Well, we look forward to seeing what you guys do. And you said the fall is when everything will start to kind of get the ball rolling as far as classes?
Our website will be launching soon.
Okay, what is the website in case people want to check it out?
www.creativepeaks.org, and that's Peaks, Peaks.
Nice.
Like the peak of a mountain.
Got it. I've seen your logo. It's got all the colorful mountains.
So we will have a video up on the website that sort of shows what we're all about. If you've listened to me this far, you'll recognize my voice in the video. And I also did the animation for the video.
Nice. And I've seen it. It's a very cool video. Thanks. What's the title of the video in case people want to check that out?
It's called A Simple Recipe.
Okay.
So I won't say too much about it. You'll see what it's all about.
Okay, let it speak for itself. It's on your YouTube channel too,
it is
though,
on our
right?
YouTube
You have a YouTube channel?
Yeah, which is also Creative Peaks. So the video kind of shows through a story kind of some of the problems we find with private teaching and how we think we can solve them.
Okay. And I have to compliment you on your illustrations, by the way. They're
thank you.
very creative, and it was a fun video to watch
Thank
too,
you.
and informative too.
Yeah.
As well.
So, and that's another bit of advice I didn't think I'd get to use that part of my hobby.
Exactly.
In
there
something
you go.
professional, and you brought it in. So don't be afraid to use all those skills.
All the facets of the creative stuff.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on the Arts Unknown podcast, Beth.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. It's a lot of fun. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. My name is Jared Rocco, your host. And until next time, we'll see you later. All right, that's it for today's episode of the Arts Unknown podcast. I'd like to say a special thank you to my guest today, Beth Sterling, for coming on the show and sharing her stories. If you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Arts Unknown podcast, consider subscribing to the show. You can find us on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. We'd also love to hear your thoughts on the show, so leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher to let us know how we're doing. My name is Jared Rocco, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening.